one of the infamous incidents in maritime industry, the Exxon Valdez oil spill. Exxon Valdez oil spill was a man-made disaster that occurred when Exxon Valdez, an oil tanker owned by the Exxon Shipping Company, spilled 11 million gallons of crude oil in Alaska's Prince William Sound on March 24, 1989. It was the worst oil spill in U.S. history until the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010. The Exxon Valdez oil slick covered 1,300 miles of coastline and killed hundreds of thousands of seabirds, otters, seals, and whales. Nearly 30 years later, buckets of crude oil remain in some location. After the spill, Exxon Valdez returned to the service under a different name, operating for more than two decades as an oil tanker and or carrier. But the question is, what really happened during that time? And why the Exxon Valdez caused that much of damage in seas? So this is what happened. On the evening of March 23, 1989, Exxon Valdez left the port of Valdez, Alaska, bound for Long Beach, California, with 53 million gallons of crude oil on board. At 4 minutes after midnight on March 24, the ship struck Bligh Reef, which is a well-known navigation hazard in Alaska's Prince William Sound. The impact of the collision tore open the ship's hull, causing some 11 million of gallons of crude oil to spill into the ocean. At the time, it was the largest single oil spill in U.S. waters. Initial attempts to contain the oil failed, and in the months that followed, the oil slick spread, eventually covering about 1,300 miles of coastline. Investigators later learned that Joseph Hazelwood, the captain of the Exxon Valdez, had been drinking at that time and had allowed an unlicensed third mate to steer the massive ship. Years later, Hazelwood was acquitted of felony charges, and he was convicted of a single charge of misdemeanor negligence, where he fined $50,000 and ordered to perform 1,000 hours of community service. Now, let us talk about how did they manage to clean the oil spill. In the months after the Exxon Valdez oil spill, Exxon employees, federal responders, and more than 11,000 Alaska residents worked to clean up the oil spill. Exxon paid about $2 billion of cleanup costs and $1.8 billion for habitat restoration and personal damages related to the oil spill. Now, let us talk about the environmental and economic impact of Exxon Valdez oil spill in Alaska, especially in Prince William Sound. Prince William Sound had been a pristine wilderness before this spill. The Exxon Valdez disaster dramatically changed all of that, taking a major toll on wildlife. It killed an estimated 250,000 seabirds, 3,000 otters, 300 seals, 250 bald eagles, and 22 killer whales. The oil spill also may have played a role in the collapse of the salmon and herring fisheries in Prince William Sound in the early 90s. Fishermen went bankrupt, and the economies of small shoreline towns, including the Valdez and Cordova, suffered in the following years. Some reports estimated the total economic loss from the Exxon Valdez oil spill to be as much as $2.8 billion. A 2001 study found oil contamination remaining at more than half of the 91 beachhead sites tested in Prince William Sound. The spill had killed an estimated 40% of all sea otters living in the sound. The sea otters population didn't recover to its pre-spill level until 2014, 25 years later after the spill. Because of the Exxon Valdez oil spill, the U.S. Congress passed the Oil Pollution Act of 1990, which President George Washington Bush signed into law that year. The Oil Pollution Act of 1990 increased penalties for companies responsible for oil spills and required that all oil tankers in United States waters have a double hull. After this spill happened, what do you think will happen to the ship Exxon Valdez? The ship Exxon Valdez, first commissioned in 1986, was repaired and returned to the service year after the spill in a different ocean and under a different name. The single-hulled ship could no longer transport oil in U.S. waters due to the new regulations. The ship began running oil transport routes in Europe where single-hulled oil tankers were still allowed. There it was named as the Exxon Mediterranean, then later it was renamed again to the Sea River Mediterranean, and finally the SR Mediterranean. In 2002, the European Union banned single-hull tankers and the former Exxon Valdez moved to Asian waters. Exxon Valdez sold the infamous tanker in 2008 to a Hong Kong-based shipping company. The company converted the old oil tanker to an ore carrier, renaming it the Dongfeng Ocean. In 2010, the star-crossed ship collided with another bulk carrier in the Yellow Sea and was once again severely damaged. After that, the ship was renamed once more after the collision, becoming the Oriental Nicety, and it was sold for scrap to an Indian company and dismantled in 2012. That would be all for the story of the Exxon Valdez. Thank you and have a safe trip.